Okay, another lesson today dedicated to this new task 2. I haven't done this one before. It does seem familiar, but I didn't do it in this way when it's a do you agree or disagree question, and when they combined two things in one sentence. Because here they say some people think that the news media has become much more influential in people's lives today. So it's like one statement. Influential is the adjective saying something is really powerful, right? There's a lot of influence from that, and I agree with that part. So when they say, do you agree or disagree? I agree with that, right? But another thing they said here is, and it's a negative development, which means there are two statements here. There's too much influence, and it's also a negative development, and I agree with both, which means it's going to be a one-sided essay, a very simple, very direct approach, nothing complicated, right? But obviously there's a reason why I chose this specific essay. There are many reasons actually, but just to be clear, today is March 3rd, 2026, and for 2 days in a row we are getting all these news about the war between Iran and Israel, and everything related to it. And while reading these news, most of the time you will see things that I'm going to mention today, and those things are fear-mongering and sensationalism. Or maybe I can separate them, right, like this, and we can define each. I'll define them in my way, and I will ask Google to define them for me too. And the reason why I'm doing it as usual is because I want to teach you a concept and then show you how that can be used in a task 2. Two keywords for me today: fear-mongering and sensationalism. I hope I'm pronouncing them correctly. I will double check that soon. But first, let's start with simple definitions by myself, right? Fear-mongering is using the news, the platform, to frighten people. Obviously, you have the word fear in this case, and that's why I'm going to say using a news platform to frighten people. Mostly as a way to provoke an emotion, I'm going to say, and attract people's attention. That's the way I see it. Okay, so fear-mongering is using a news platform to frighten people, to make them feel afraid, mostly as a way to provoke an emotion in someone and attract people's attention. So we can connect the word fear to the word frighten, and we can connect the word frighten to the word afraid. And I am going to use this kind of nominalization today to write a beautiful main body 1 or main body 2 with this word. And the other word is sensationalism. And you can pretty much see this word here, sensation, and that is something surprising. So sensationalism is, I'm going to say again, using a news platform to shock people, right? Shock people, make them feel surprised, right? But in a way that maybe, I'm going to say, maybe too much, but also I can say in a way that may be considered an over-exaggeration. Yeah, that's the good word. Spelling mistake somewhere. Oh, okay, I just separate that, I guess. So exaggeration is when something happened and you're making it sound like it was worse, right? So for example, 2 people were killed, but you're making it sound like it was 200 people that were killed. That is some sort of sensationalism. Now, to make sure that I give you more or less correct definitions, let's go to Google now and ask Google to help us with this as well. So fear-mongering, meaning the action of deliberately arousing public fear or alarm about a particular issue. Yeah, so more or less similar to what I said. And obviously, it's mostly used by the news platforms, many news platforms, of course. Fear-mongering. And then, by the way, arouse is provoke, right? Provoke an emotion. They said arouse public fear or alarm, which is also the emotion, of course. And then we have sensationalism, meaning, especially in journalism, the presentation of stories in a way that's intended to provoke public interest or excitement at the expense of accuracy, which means it's over exaggerated. At the expense of accuracy means they might not care too much about how accurate things are, but they want your attention. So if 2 people died, they will say 20, right? If 1 city was attacked, they might say 3 cities were attacked. Why? Because they want to make things sound very loud to catch your attention, which is a very normal thing in journalism. But when I say it's normal, it's a normal tool, but is it normal to just frighten people all the time? We don't think so. That's why today, when we go back to this essay right here, I'm going to use these 2 things as to prove that it is truly a negative development. It's not good because people are afraid all the time. People are getting news that are not always correct, right? In a certain way. I don't think I'll use examples because I don't want to be biased, probably. But these 2 words will be explored in 2 main bodies in a very one-sided essay, of course. And again, I'm doing this because I'm seeing a lot of articles for the past 2 days, and I am starting to notice as an adult now, I'm starting to see how news will do everything to catch your attention. And of course, they're not always telling the truth. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. Or even if there is truth, sometimes you're reading it and it just seems like it's over dramatized. Again, to evoke, to provoke, to arouse an emotion in people. Because I guess if it's presented in a very simple way, maybe people are not going to be interested, right? And that's why you're going to check all these posts now about the current war, and many journalists will just keep repeating phrases like World War III, World War III all the time, right? We don't know if it's going to start very soon. We hope it doesn't. We want peace. We want to live. We want prosperity. But the news outlets, right, they're doing their job when they want to make sure that you're reading. Because I guess if they don't do that, maybe some people won't read. Anyways, let's see how I can write this one-sided sample. Again, I also have to prove that it's influential and it's a negative development, so I have to make sure I understand and use the keywords in the right way. But of course, fear-mongering and sensationalism, they will be used, of course. And let's start with the introduction. And the way I want to start it is by saying there is a belief. I always use the word view, so maybe today I can use the word belief. There's a belief that the news media has, should I say gained importance, or should I say has become, or has an ever increasing, nah, I think I'm overthinking here. I think I should just say there's a belief that the news media is now more powerful than before, considering its impact in people's lives or on people's daily lives. Yeah, I think I'll say that. So there's a belief that the news media is now more powerful than before, considering its impact on people's daily lives. Impact is written in relation to the word influential. I have to have it, right? And then we have to make sure that I mention negative development. So I'm saying people also believe that this impact is negative, right? Mostly negative. There you go. So they say, and it's a negative development. And maybe I don't need mostly, maybe it's just negative. So people also believe that this influence is negative. Why I said influence? Because I already said impact. So now we have power, we have impact, we have influence. That is how we show good paraphrasing to the examiner by trying to say that we deserve a good score for the lexical resource. Obviously. So there you go. Does it believe that the news media is now more powerful than before, considering its impact on people's daily lives? People also believe that this influence is negative, and I'm gonna say I agree. I agree with this perspective, right? Perspective. I agree with this perspective, since there is too much fear mongering and sensationalism that affect people's perception, right? So I agree with this perspective, since there is too much fear mongering and sensationalism that affect people's perception of ongoing events and and their emotional responses. Yeah. So the way we do it is, if we're saying that there is power, there's influence behind these stories, then I have to show what kind of influence that is, right? And that is actually the emotional response. Because imagine you're having a good day, you just had good coffee in the morning, everything is good, and then you just open your phone, right, or your laptop, you start reading, and then they just say, yeah, World War III. Everybody's dying, you're gonna die, you will never see grandchildren, your dog will die, your cat will die, it's gonna be a bad world, and all the people you love will die. You just imagine that. You just had good coffee, now the news is telling you that very soon it might be your last coffee, basically, right? How do you feel? You feel bad. You feel bad. You don't feel good about it. And most of the people will have an emotional response. So during the day, there might be some apathy, right? Like, we don't care anymore. Okay, if we're dying, why should I work? And this is the kind of expectation, this is the kind of an emotional response that's not going to affect your day in a good way. That's how I feel. And again, I understand that some of this fear-mongering and some of this sensationalism might be actually good, because of course they are trying to warn us and inform us about what's going on. However, sometimes it's too much, as you can see. That's why I'm saying too much over here. It's just become a normal part of journalism now, so that's what I'm trying to prove. I agree with this assessment. Let's start with sensationalism or fear-mongering. Let's start with fear-mongering, actually, and then talk about sensationalism. So, most stories that appear in various mediums, and I do think medium was like a platform thing, right? Medium, meaning, let's check this out. Yeah. Noun is the agency, a means of doing something. That's a means of communication, mass media. So I do think that's a good word, of course. Go back. So most stories that appear in various mediums now use fear-mongering. Can I say use fear-mongering? Like, is that a tool? Hold on. Fear-mongering. That's a noun. That's a noun, yeah. Activity of spreading stories. I feel like that's okay if I use it here in this way. So most stories that appear in various mediums now use fear-mongering to arouse a certain emotional response, right, in viewers, people who watch things happen. There you go. For instance, even in regional conflicts, right? So, for instance, even in regional conflicts between smaller, let's say smaller nations, the news agencies might mention the possibility of World War III. Because remember, they have been mentioning World War III for many years now. As long as I remember myself, I'm 29. I'm going to be 30 soon, right? As long as I remember myself, every single year, in every little conflict, they always say it's going to be World War III soon. And they might be right. They might be right. It might be World War III soon. But the soon, I don't know, it's never defined really. Because it was soon when I was 5 years old. It was soon when I was 10 years old, 15 years old, 20. I'm 29 already. And I'm thankful that World War III didn't happen. But to use it every time in every little conflict and just try to ruin people's day, not the best thing, of course. That's why I said it, right? For instance, even in regional conflicts between smaller nations, the news agencies might mention the possibility of World War III, thus attracting more publicity. I think publicity would be a good word. Publicity is like attention, right? That's attracting more publicity. This is one of many tools journalists use to keep people in fear. Can I say that? Keep people, or should I say keep people frightened? Frightened. There you go. So this is one of many tools journalists use to keep people frightened. And they usually manage, right, to did I say arouse? I said arouse. Provoke? Evoke? Was evoke a word? I think evoke was a good word. Evoke meaning elicit the response. Elicit, what a word. Can I use that? Yeah, nice. Elicit is my, yeah, elicit, that's a good word.
Elicit.
Nice. That was too loud, I'm sorry.
Elicit.
Okay. By the way, did I pronounce fear-mongering correctly?
Fear-mongering.
Yeah, cool. Nice. Elicit, what a word. There you go. So this is one of many tools journalists use to keep people frightened, and they usually manage to elicit a reaction from the majority of people. This reaction is negative and can affect how people spend their day. Because again, if you watch news in the morning, you might not want to live sometimes with all the bad things happening in the world, you know. So this is one of many tools journalists use. Yeah, cool. How many words is that? 79. It's not many words, to be fair. Should I add a sentence here? This reaction is negative and can affect how people spend their day. Right. I want to say mood swings. That's a good phrase, mood swings, how your mood changes, you know. I want to use that here as well. So we can say this reaction is negative and can affect how people spend their day. In other words, there may be more mood swings or apathy after watching news in the morning. There may be more mood swings or apathy. By the way, apathy, I think I said that, but just to be clear, apathy is when you don't care about anything anymore. Lack of interest in life, lack of enthusiasm in life, and eventually lack of concern for anything, because, you know, the world is ending, according to many journalists. So that's how they might feel. That's much better now. 96 words. I love it. I needed this sentence. It helps me have this little conclusion for the first main body. Now, the second main body, of course, is going to be about sensationalism. And this is where I'm going to say this. If it is not fear-mongering, right, journalists can often use sensationalism instead. So if it's not fear-mongering, journalists can often use sensationalism instead. What they often do, or let's say what they do quite frequently, is exaggerate. So what they do quite frequently is exaggerate for attention, right, at the expense of accuracy. And we can say, to be specific, in an event, let's say in an event where 10 people died, right? Let's say a certain platform can claim a bigger number of casualties. By the way, casualties, was it like death? Yeah, a person killed or injured in a war or accident. Yeah, for sure. So to be specific, in an event where 10 people died, a certain platform can claim a bigger number of casualties, right? It's not a trick. I wanted to use the word trick, but I cannot say that. A strategy, maybe? A strategy used to gain more notoriety. Notoriety is negative attention, negative publicity, right? So what they do quite frequently is exaggerate for attention at the expense of accuracy. To be specific, in an event where, can I use this example though? Where 10 people died, a certain platform can claim a bigger number of casualties, a strategy used to gain more notoriety. Yeah, I feel like that's going to be a suitable example. And we can say in a similar case, I want to have one more example, In a similar case, let's say a regular marketing, let's say in a similar case, a regular marketing campaign can be supported as a life-changing event. Yeah, I want to talk about marketing. I want to talk about business too, Like imagine there's some nice product and now it's being advertised on the news, and the news are making it seem like it's going to change everybody's lives. You know how that happens in business. Because I keep using deaths and the wars, but I feel like I also should talk about daily lives as well, because we're talking about daily life, And that's why mentioning marketing is cool in this case. In a similar case, a regular marketing campaign can be supported as a life-changing event thanks to some news outlets, right? Further proving the point that many situations are treated as more important than they should be. There you go. This is sensationalism. Like everything is a sensation. Because remember, sensation is something important, something life-changing. Just the word sensation itself.
Sensation.
A widespread reaction of interest and excitement. Let's go back. There you go. So in a similar case, a regular marketing campaign can be supported as a life-changing event thanks to some news outlets, further proving that the point that many situations are treated as more important than they should be. There you go. Fear-mongering, sensationalism. Yeah. Nice. And we can say this importance, should I say this unnecessary? Should I say overhyped? Maybe I shouldn't. Yeah, just move on. In conclusion, I agree that news are gaining too much, or let's say news platforms are gaining too much attention that has become a part of people's daily lives, right? Such a change is mostly dangerous or detrimental or unhealthy or negative or disadvantages. Should I say that? I think I need to use like the adjective form. There you go. That was difficult. So such a change or such a trend, right? Or tendency is mostly bad, since people spend too much of their energy that could be used for more beneficial actions, something more beneficial, for more beneficial pursuits. Yeah, like chasing something better in life. So such a tendency is mostly disadvantageous or disadvantages. I forgot the pronunciation of the adjective. Since people spend too much of their energy that could be used, that could otherwise, that's a good word here, be used for more beneficial pursuits other than watching the news and just being afraid of tomorrow. You know. Here we go. I think it's enough words. 281. We do have balance between these two main bodies. 88 words. This one is 96. There you go. Nice. The introduction is 53 words, and this one is 44. Cool. Classic two main body approach. I agreed 100% with what was said by other people. We did use fear-mongering. We did use sensationalism as well. There we go. Although they are related in many ways. That's why I added the marketing campaign example to make sure it's not just war, but it's also daily things like buying a certain product. And as you can see, many things are overhyped now just to get people's attention and to control their emotions in a little way on a daily basis. There we go. I tried to be as neutral as possible, as you can see, and I think I did explain everything in a very friendly way. I could be very biased. I could use some dangerous examples, but I don't want to because IELTS does not favor biased responses, as you guys remember. So I tried to keep everything in a very simple, and a very clear, and a very neutral way, probably. There we go. 281 words, two main bodies, another essay completed. Thank you for watching, if you watched fully, of course.